Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 25 of GT Masters, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of predominantly GT class official racing cars, but also some which are more running along those lines but aren't necessarily actual real race cars or even race cars at all. Some of them may be just one-off or limited run track day specials which have similar kind of overall packages to a GT car, such as the FXX for instance. In this particular pick we are reviewing a car which has been on Gran Turismo for quite a while now, and it's one of those cars which, kind of like the Gillett Vertigo and some others, and also to some degree the Viper GTSR that we reviewed in the last episode, is a car which was further back on Gran Turismo kind of a hero car. It was one of those cars which was new to the game, it was a fresh car, it looks great, it's eye-catching, and it served people really well. I remember back then it was one of the best handling cars of Gran Turismo 3. Gran Turismo 4 not necessarily as much, but still a good car. Gran Turismo 5 didn't really use it at all. Gran Turismo 6 I rarely use it. So surely it's not really a great car anymore. Well, to be honest, the main reason why I don't use it that much is the same reason why I don't really use most of the cars in this series that much, because I just don't race much anymore. I spend by far the majority of my time on Gran Turismo just test driving cars for the sake of reviews. I don't actually race them that much anymore. From the times that I did used to race cars more on the game though, and obviously from back in the day on Gran Turismo as well, this was a dependable car. And if I had to sum up the entirety of the M3 GTR, which is of course, as you can see, the car in this episode, it would be with that word, dependable. This is an extremely dependable choice of race car. It doesn't really do anything to surprise you. It does exactly what you want it to do. It's successful, it's fast, it's not overly powerful, but it has enough power to get the job done. It's powered by a 4-litre engine, it's rear-wheel drive as you'd probably expect. Puts out 727 horsepower, so it's no way near as powerful as the M3 GT2, which is of course the natural successor to this car in the game. But I actually still prefer this car. The M3 GT2 is a faster car and it is a premium car, and it's also, funnily enough, a lot cheaper. 750,000 credits cheaper in fact. This car costs 1 million credits compared to 350 grand for the M3 race cars of the newer generation. So is it really 4 times better? Well, consider what it has to offer. It has over 100 horsepower less, but the top speed is still in excess of 220. The newer model only does around 230 to 235 easily anyway, so it's not that much slower, and there are very few tracks which actually require that kind of advantage. As far as acceleration, they pretty much break even. You really need a much longer straight for the newer M3 to get an advantage. This car also puts out 524 foot-pounds of torque and weighs in at 1120 kilos, and I would actually say that that weight is a more powerful and more telling comparison of this car to the newer M3s than the power is, because less weight is always more of an advantage to a race car. This car weighs over 100 kilos less than the newer M3s. They weigh just under 1250 kilos. This car weighs 1120, so significantly lighter, and although it's not necessarily the absolute lightest car in the series, it is one of the lighter models. That's lighter than the GT500 car and down there with the best of them as far as its overall weight, especially in a slightly older style of GT car. It puts out just under 650 horsepower per tonne, which is not bad at all, and the PP is 624, which I would say is really good. That is significantly lower than the newer M3s, which sit around 645, and to be honest, they're not that effective at that level. 650 or 645 PP, you can start getting prototypes with serious power around that level. You take a BMW M3 of the newer generation race car up against, say, a prototype, or a Lister Storm, or a McLaren F1 Longtail, it's not going to stand a chance on the majority of tracks. Right down at 624 pp for this car though, that's a much more feasible option, because at the 625 pp level, 727 horsepower is a lot. You cannot detune anything like a McLaren Longtail or a full-on prototype and have anywhere near that kind of power. But because of the fact that this car isn't overly heavy either, it has a good mix of both. Now, 1,000,000 credits is a substantial amount of money, but that puts it on par with many of the older favourites in the game, such as the RX-8 LM, the RX-7 LM, and various others that sit around the 1,000,000 credit mark, the Zonda LM, various others. And for that kind of price, yes, it is 4 times more expensive, but I do prefer it overall. It's not a premium, which is a shame, and to be honest, it doesn't seem like the kind of car that they would update. It's not really important enough in the grand scheme of things, but its overall performance is more than good enough for at least 90% of the tracks that you'll ever need it on, anything up to, say, the Nürburgring Ring. Not necessarily a recommended car for something like the Le Mans, but for pretty much any semi to severely twisty track, it's a great choice. The top-end performance is good enough for most circumstances, but not among the best, of course, as we already mentioned, and the handling is by far the best attribute about the M3 GTR, and always has been. Ever since it was first included on Gran Turismo, it had one of the best handling signatures of any GT car. In fact, it handles a bit more like a touring car, to be honest, than a GT car. And I personally consider that to be a good thing, because touring cars are typically known for having tons of grip, and this car has exactly that. It's a dependable car with fantastic handling. It makes a brilliant endurance car because it's not just fast, but it's fun to drive, and it's not very taxing at all to drive. It's very easy to drive, dependable, and certainly fast. So definitely worth checking out as an alternative. But that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.